Hello, welcome to the January 6th, 2023 Club Cubase live stream. I'm going to do a quick audio test, make sure everything is coming through, and then we will go ahead and get started. Bear with me just for a moment. All right, it sounds like my monitoring computer is coming through fine. My name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America, which is the U.S. distributor of Steinberg products, and I'll be the host of the live stream. I'm presenting from outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. If you're watching this live, please feel free to introduce yourself and let us know where you're from. And if you've not attended a live stream before, how it works is you could submit questions in the live chat field or send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, realize that my ability to answer all the questions in real time may soon be eclipsed with a number of questions. So if you don't see an immediate response to your question, if we could try to avoid repeating the same question, that would be appreciated. It just kind of slows down the whole process. When asking questions, if you could indicate which operating system you're running, which version of Cubase, whether it's LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, and which version number, such as 10, 10.5, 11, or 12, that information would be helpful. We should have all of the topics covered in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field of the video after it's done, with timestamps so that you could find different topics easily. And if you wanted to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, you could go to cubaseindex.com. And we want to give Jan from Stockholm a special thanks for creating that website. We also have two people that serve as moderators. We have Jazz Dude and Agent K. They're not Steinberg employees. They just do this to make it a better community. So I want to give special thanks to them. We also want to give point out another wonderful resource of information is the Cubase Nation Discord. And Jazz Dude does a lot of work with that, so we want to give special thanks to him. All right, so with that, we will go ahead and get started. So a question from JB. Having trouble replacing multiple audio files with Alt-Shift in Cubase 12 would only replace one file. What am I doing wrong? So often when we go to replace a file, so if I have a file that's used multiple times in the project and I want it to replace every instance that that file was used in the project, what we could do is drag a file over using the Shift key. So if I wanted to just come here, so while I drag it over a clip, I could hold down the Shift key. And then we'll get this little prompt. Do you want to modify all vents that refer to that same material? So every loop that is, referring to that same audio file, I can now just say all, and it will replace the audio file with the new file. Now, if we have multiple files that are selected that are different files, this doesn't necessarily allow us to replace different files, but the same file. So now if I have all of these events selected and I drag over a loop over top and hold down Shift, since there's only one instance of that particular audio file, it's just going to override that particular audio file. So it has to be not multiple files, but multiple files that are the same file. And then it could replace all of those particular functions. So let me know if that helps. All right, so we have Mark Winslow wishing aloha to everyone from Hawaii. We have Uno Memento from Finland. All right, and we have Benny from Sweden. We also have Daniela from Germany. We have Robbie Bowling from Dallas, Texas. We see Jan from Cubase Index from Stockholm. We have THMS checking in from Germany. Right, so we see Benny will have a new album released with his hard rock band, Anima Templi, after 10 years. So it sounds like fun. Make sure you share it when it's done. All right, and we have Jason Sykes from South Shields, England. right, so we have a question from Dallas LaRue. Let me just... is there a way to convert mono to stereo in Cubase other than using the mono to stereo plugin? And would that be used on the master fader? If you wanted to actually, just take a particular section, so say if we're listening to this, and if we go into the control room, there's down mix presets, so I could just say, I wanted to listen to this in mono versus stereo. We could do it right there without utilizing a plugin. But generally, if it's going to be a mono source, if it's going out of a, I'll just go to a different project just to show. So you could still have a mono track that goes out to a stereo output. So even though like this bass track is in a mono track, since it is being routed to the stereo out, we could pan it independently like that. And if you wanted to now convert a mono file here, one of the things that you could do is if we go to like a render in place, and we choose to include some of the complete signal path, which would include the stereo output. And we hit render, that should create a stereo audio file. So let me just come here. So just come here to render in place one more time. So I won't have it. So we'll choose complete signal path. And then we could have that as a stereo file within the project. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Dallas. All right, so we see a question. Hi, Greg. I have some percussion samples on 5 tracks. Can I open channel strip for all of the selected channels and adjust the send level? Like I want to adjust the send level to all selected channels at one time. Okay, so let's say if I have a number of tracks here, so let's say here's my drum tracks. If you just come over here and put it into Q-Link, that now if I wanted to add like a send, like say let's add a reverb send to this. Or I'll just add it to selected tracks, which is add these. So now that we have our Q-Link activated, as I adjust on so I'm going to select the number of channels. So now that Q-Link is activated, I could adjust the parameters of 1 if I come over here. And then as we go to our different channels, we could have that same EQ. Or if we go to our channel strip, if I have multiple selected, and say, okay, I want to come over here to tools. Let's add the envelope shaper. That now when we go to look at all of our different tracks, that those settings have automatically been applied. So try just to, have the channel selected and activate Quick Link, and then whatever changes you do, that could be applied to multiply selected tracks, Patrick. All right, so we see Soren has a new album release. It's close with 17 new songs on January 13th. Congratulations. All right, wonderful to see Gareth on. And Lola from Spain. So thanks for joining us. All right, so you see Gareth, I got to play bass for a project for him last week, so I'm glad he liked the bass part. It was a nice song. Enjoyed playing on it. All right, so we have Bruce checking in from Simi Valley. All right, and we have Stefan checking in from Sweden. All right, and Mr. Dally 67 checking in from Denmark. All right, so we see a question, what about oversampling in Cubase? So some of the plugins will do that, but we also kind of take advantage of, in which probably more important is, for audio engine type stuff, is if you go to the audio system, you could also adjust the processing precision to 64-bit floating point, but some of the plugins will offer oversampling capabilities as well. So it's usually just going to be like on a particular plugin basis. All right, so we see from Soren, my girlfriend uses mono to stereo plugin on a master insert to get stereo width. Is that the correct way? What is the correct way to use mono to stereo plugins? So, if you're going for width, I would just use the stereo enhancer. So let's say if I wanted to come to, let's say we'll go to my master output here, and I'll just revert this because I've destroyed the mix. So say as we're doing this, just grab this stereo enhancer plugin. So we'll get to the stereo enhancer. And then if you wanted to, so if you want stuff to be more mono sounding or wider, and there's also the Imager plugin, which is a multi-channel. So if you wanted to do the Imager, we could actually just say, okay, I want it more width in the highs, but not necessarily the lows. Or that could sound a little floppy. So this way you could actually, in different frequency ranges, have different, different stereo width controls, which is probably the better solution. So I would use the Imager plugin. All right, so we see question. Hello, Greg. If I have to change my PC Windows, where can I find all my presets and settings that I've made into the VST plugin, stock and third party? So generally, the stock the stock presets, any of the presets that you made will be available to access in the profile manager. So you could do that. So that's how VST3 plugins will be handled. Different third-party companies may not use that preset management system. So depending on the third-party plugins, you may have to, figure out how to migrate those particular settings if they don't use the standard VST3 preset mechanism for that. So a lot of third parties don't do that, so they have kind of consistency between different plugin formats. And that's a decision that plugin company or that plugin developer has made. So you'd have to check with your third-party plugins if it doesn't use standard VST presets. All right. So we just see from question, what is the best way to quantize an entire project all at once? I would probably not, I know sometimes it's tempting to just, say, okay, I want to come here and then, hit, you could select all your files and then hit the letter Q if you wanted to. So let's say, okay, I want to quantize everything to 16th notes, and then we could take all your MIDI and all of your audio and quantize. So you could do that, but that may not give you kind of the best results, because some parts you may want to quantize to 16ths, some you may want to quantize to half notes or quarter notes, different values. But you could select all the events and hit Q and see if that helps. But I would maybe just I tend to be of the school of like I want to do kind of spot quantizing when necessary. But if you wanted to select everything, just whatever events are selected will be applied to the quantize value. All right, so you see oversampling plugins in Cubase. So let's see, I think it might be, let's see if we, some of the plugins that have it, I think. I think like Razor might have oversampling capabilities. But a number of them, will kind of do that. But I would say if your processing doesn't sound good, it's not oversampling that's doing it. So we see Peter's just saying, I still sound a little congested. So yeah, I'm feeling fine. So I may have a cough every 4 hours or so, but I'm feeling much better. Thank you for asking. We'll just go for deep voice mode. All right. All right. Wonderful to see John Costigan on the live stream from Kenosha, Wisconsin. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we have a question from Into the Vault. Hi from Oakland, California, Mac 13.1, Cubase 12. Does Cubase Pro 12 have a destruct mode record in MIDI or instrument? So if you wanted to, record, your audio file will always be underlying, but if I come here and just record, so, the file that I just recorded is recorded over top, so it doesn't necessarily get rid of the underlying file. With MIDI information, this might be slightly different. So let's say if I come, hang on just 1 second. All right, so let's say if I just want to do some MIDI recording here. So let's say, okay, now just and if I wanted to destructively, overwrite my MIDI stuff, we could go to our MIDI record mode here, and I'll just say, okay, I just want to overwrite. So now my existing kick parts, when I hit record, we could just simply have those overwritten if you wanted to, or you could just come over here if you wanted to, replace. So let's say now if I record, that the underlying MIDI data is automatically erased. So when you come here, you can just set your MIDI record mode to replace, if you wanted to. So, and at that point, the underlying MIDI data will automatically be overwritten and be, basically gone after you record. All right, so we see a question. I'm thinking about switching from Logic to Cubase. Is it the same experience / performance on Mac OS as on Windows? Since I love my Mac, so I think that both platforms work great. Cubase is obviously M1 native, so if you have an Apple Silicon chip, you'll get benefits of that. But I go back and forth between Mac and PC all the time, and to me they're pretty identical. So. All right, so we just see a question from Benny. I sometimes see you copying and dragging down a track to the next track. How do you do that? All right, so let's say... All right, so a lot of times, you could just come over here and duplicate tracks. That's one way. If you wanted to hold down Shift and double click, you could select all the events and then, move that. Let's say if we add an audio track, I could just hold down my Alt or Option key and copy the events down. So let me know if that's what you're talking about, Benny. All right, so we see from Patrick, Greg. I think among all the DAWs, Cubase has the best stock-in plugins. As far as I used, what's your thoughts on who's the idea behind FX modulation? So there's a lot of people that want to have very simple control to take a very simple part and make it more interesting, and that's kind of what the FX modulator is really for. Let me just open up quick project to show some of. So where people are doing all sorts of crazy stuff to, take something that's maybe a simple part and make it more interesting musically. I think the FX modulator is a great tool for that. Just get this project open here. Okay, so let's say we have so I'm going to take like this pad sound here. I'll just kind of start with a brand new instance of it here. All right, so I'm gonna just, we could have, I think, 6 different modules. So let's say I just wanted to we'll start with maybe volume. So at this point, I'm going to add my volume module. And if we wanted to kind of draw in our own shapes, we could do that, or if we wanted to. So instead of me having to do automation like this, and we could say, okay, I want that to be like quarter notes or 16th notes. And if we wanted to try different shapes, But let's say I'll just do like a simple, and then if I wanted to smooth, so it's not as, and now let's say, okay, I wanted to go to panning. So just say, okay, let's go to pan. And maybe I want this to use this shape and I want it to be for 2 measures. And let's say, let's throw in kind of a flanger. And again, if you wanted to just double click and put in different nodes. And then you could also just kind of come over here, and if you wanted to look at perhaps the spectrum view of different parts. So we could say I only wanted this particular volume effect on the mid range. Or I wanted to now add a filter. So all sorts of kind of very creative stuff like that that you could do. So taking something that was, you know, just from a simple pad sound to and then we could even say, okay, I want this to be and being able to do that type of stuff. So instead of having to have like, you know, multiple plugins to do that and set up complex LFOs, you could kind of do this all within one single plugin with the FX modulator. So just wonderful creative effects that you could do with it, Patrick. All right, so we have a question. How do you automate the pitch of a MIDI clip where it goes up in cents and not semitones? Okay, so if you wanted to, let's say it will take, we'll just come over to another, switch to a different project here. So if you really wanted to do this, you know, in the MIDI domain, what you do is just kind of come over here and just go to pitch bend. And for each instrument, it would set kind of a different amount of pitch bend. So here we see -2 semitones up, 2 semitones down. So if I wanted to just kind of draw in a pitch bend change somewhere in between. Where it's not necessarily going to be. So if you don't want it to be snapped to, we could have it snapped to semitones and show the semitone grid to match and set that up to match the instrument. But if you don't want that to be on, you could just draw in different pitch bend amounts for your MIDI data, just like that. So it's a common standard MIDI message. Let me know if that makes sense. All right, my chat field just jumped. Let me just find back where it was. All right, so we have Alex Mendoza checking in from San Antonio. We have Balsa checking in from Montenegro. Thanks for joining us. And we see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. All right, and John Costigan wants to remind people to hit the like button. All right, and we have Pierrick Duran from Lille, France. Thanks for joining us. We have Orlando Medina. All right, so we have a question from Patrick. I have some effects on channel. I want to copy all the tracks. Can I copy paste all the effect at the time to all 5 channels? So I think we could do that. Let's go ahead and scroll down here. Let's look at our mix console. Okay, so let's say I want it to, I have these effects on channel 1 that I wanted to copy over to these 3 channels. So I'll select these 3 channels, hold down my shift key. So you could just kind of drag your inserts over like that. I think we could do it on multiple channels at once. So let's say if we click at the top, let's copy. And if we have these selected, I think if we go to the bottom, we'll see copy first selected channel settings. Oh, sorry. I'll just come here. So I'm going to select from the bottom, right click, and then we could copy first selected channel settings. Select these, and then you could right click, and I think that you could paste settings to selected channels, just like that. So if you just drag from the top, you can copy to an individual track, or if you want to copy all of the settings, right click at the bottom where the track label is, copy first selected channel settings, and then whatever channels that you have here, select those channels, right click from the bottom, and paste the settings to selected channels. So let me know if that's helpful, Patrick. All right, so we have Orlando checking in from El Salvador. Thanks for joining us. All right, so a question from Andreas. Any way to use the fader port 8 in instruments of instrument track for changing parameters? So yeah, I'm sure you could just do it directly, set it up as a MIDI remote control, and then, you know, once you've defined the MIDI fader port 8, you may want to, if it's working as Mackie control, you may want to go to your studio setup and make sure that it's not configured as a Mackie control. But once it's set here, anything that transmits MIDI, you could use as standard quick controls to control instrument parameters of particular plugins. So if I wanted to go to this particular instrument, I could come over here, and now that I have my quick controls, I could adjust, you know, different parameters of this particular instrument, just whatever is selected with quick control. So set it up as a MIDI remote control, and then you should be able to control any parameter of any plugin in Cubase very easily. All right, so we have a question. Are there any known bugs with Profile Manager? Doesn't seem to move my shortcuts or key commands, but defaults my color scheme back to the original Cubase 12 color. So, generally the colors aren't carried over in the controls. That's carried over in the project itself. But I'm currently running my profile from my previous MacBook into this. So make sure that once it is turned on, that it is activated, and that so a lot of times people import the profile, but maybe not activate the particular profile. So make sure that it's activated, but I do it all the time between multiple computers and haven't had any issues. All right, we see Michael Teams has begun his virtual ice cream distribution. Thank you for that. All right, and we see Tim Weinheimer from Mission Viejo. All right, so we just see from Orlando, I just see somebody help me. So if you have a question, I just saw your introduction and you saying hello, but I didn't see a question yet. But maybe it's coming in my future. All right, so we have Val Lee joining from Vienna. Great to see you again. Happy New Year. All right, so we see Lola Garrisdotter's gotten vanilla and Oreo. Sounds good. All right, so we have a question from Balsa. It says, is it possible to convert a MIDI track to a sampler track? I want to find an easy way in Cubase to have a single sample spread on a MIDI keyboard in different pitches. Yeah, so if you have like one note, so let's say if I'm here and I just wanted to, like I have one note, so let's say I'll just do C3. And when we look at our velocity here, I'll just make sure. Okay, and I'll just start it right here. So what I want to do now is let's open up the sampler track. And then I'm just going to drag this event over. And now it will just kind of automatically use that as the basis. So you could just drag and drop an audio file, like in a part that's going to an instrument track, just drag and drop it. And then you could just come over here. And again, if you just drag and drop that out, you can just come over and immediately start playing different parts. So if you say, okay, I'll go ahead and normalize. So any part that you want, just drag from an instrument track right into the sampler track, and then you can. So give that a try. Let me know if that makes sense for your workflow, Balsa. Okay, so you just see I have a problem. My retrolog is not open my presets. All right, so let's say if we go to, so the first thing I would do is maybe just come over here to media and say, let's go to user presets. So, and then you'll see VST instrument presets. So let's say if I open up retrolog here, so I'll add an instrument track. So it will. All right, so I'll just. All right, and I'll just make some changes here. All right, so now I'm going to save this preset, and we'll call it right. So I'll just Orlando. And we can see that it immediately shows up here in presets. So go to user presets and go to like instrument presets. And then you could drag it out. That will load up a new instance with that preset. And if I'm looking at it here, go to your Retrolog library, and let's see if we could just type the preset name in, and then that would automatically just change the preset just like that. So let me know if that's helpful, but see if you see it in Media Bay. If you come over to user presets, the VST instrument presets, then you should see all of your user presets that you've created directly there. All right, so you see from Patrick, question, I had 4 more ideas in the arranger track. Once, if I arranged a track, why the arranger track disappeared. If I want to make changes, how can I do? So if we have a particular project that's utilizing the arranger track, so let me see if I have... See if I had this in my recent projects. All right, I'll just open it up. All right, so if we have like our arrangement idea here for the arranger track, and we're just kind of playing along, and we can see that it's that my play order is active. So this is going to allow us to play this non-linearly. So when it gets to So let's say that's my first arrangement. Now I could just come over here and create a new chain, and then I could again just come over here and create my own arranger chain here and just simply go back and forth. But when you come over here, when you go to flatten chain, if you go to settings, instead of the destination being on the current project, you could just have it create a new project instead. So check just in the settings if you flatten the chain, because that will turn it into a linear arrangement. But maybe just choose to do it in flatten chain and do it to a new project. And then as you do this, we could choose to activate the project. This project with my 3 different arranger chain ideas is automatically preserved, and then I could just kind of see everything mapped out on this project, and when I come here, this project is preserved. So check that you have, as you come over to the arranger track here, before you flatten, go to the settings and maybe just have it do a new project right there. And if you have done it, you could always undo, and that would turn it back into the non-linear arrangement version. So check that out. All right, so we see from Into the Vault, are you able to recommend a remote Cubase instructor to help me with my big project coming up? Thank you, Greg. So if you want to email me, I might be able to put you in touch with someone. So you could email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, and we can figure out what type of project it is, and we can see if we can get help for you. Okay. See, Michael Teams is on the case with ice creams. That's wonderful. Okay, so we see question. Wait, so can the volume in the phones go higher than the output on your audio interface? Because my UR22C doesn't put out loud enough headphone sound. So one is, depending on the particular headphones that you're using with it, different headphones will have different impedances. So, I use the headphones in my UR22C all the time with, multiple headphones, and I don't have any volume problems with it. But, there could be some sometimes like AKG K240s can be soft, or I think some of the Beyer dynamics or some of the Sennheisers, but check the impedance of the particular headphones and try like different headphone volumes. So different headphones could be ideally suited for different types of headphone amps. So, often you could just check that, but, generally the headphone output on the UR22C, I'm using a UR242C, which is the same headphone output, I do tracking on it all the time without any issues, and it's very loud. So, and I've done live tracking of live drummers with it on my on my UR824 without any problems, my MR816s, as well as my my AXR4U, and the headphone volume hasn't been a problem for live drummers. And see, Valley is just saying that his UR22C is loud. All right. So we see from R3 Music, says Happy New Year all. Just curious, Greg, what OS on Mac do you find most stable with Cubase 12? So I generally, I try to keep like the OS that came with my Mac. Cause sometimes this is like a corporate issued Mac. So I can't necessarily change the OS because of IT issues with, the corporate VPN and stuff like that. So on my last one, I was running, I forgot which, but I'm currently running Monterey on my OS. I know people, they're running a wide variety of different operating systems, but, generally I don't sit there and, for fun, try out different operating systems. I try to keep my operating system stable as a known entity. Once it's working, I'll try to keep it at that OS as long as I can. So. All right, reading through comments. All right, wonderful to see Matt Elliston on live stream. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see from Quentin S. If I'm inputting a Groove MIDI drum track that, let's say, sits at 200 BPM, how do I turn it down to 120 BPM just for the drum track, not for the song? Okay, so let's say, let's do... All right, say we have MIDI drums. So let me just come over and get some MIDI drums. Okay, so let's say, all right, so we have drums, and let's say these are at 120. Okay, so, as soon as it's a MIDI drum part, as soon as I come here, so let's say I want this to play at 80 beats a minute, I just go to the tempo here and say we're going to go from 120 to 80. And then it will automatically follow the tempo changes. Now, if your other tracks, let's say our other tracks are, let's say we're at 120, and I'll just throw in like a quick bass part here. Okay, so now my bass part here is set to musical mode. So now when I play this, we can... And if I change if I change the tempo here and my bass is in musical mode, that now when we play back, the bass slows down. But if I just want the drums to slow down, I would take the other tracks and then we'll just not place them into musical mode. So now as I go to 80 beats a minute, my audio will play back at 120. And my drums are playing back at the new tempo. So whatever tempo you type in. Now, if you don't want the drums to change tempo, what you could do is select the MIDI track and put it into linear mode. So now, whatever tempo I type in, I go to 160. My drums are still playing back at the same exact time. So you can turn it off. For audio, you can select the events to follow the musical mode or not. And if you want, MIDI by default will follow it, but you could select in the track for it to be in linear mode as opposed to musical mode. So in musical mode, it will follow the tempo. It will change the speed based on the tempo. In linear mode, the position is based on that moment in time instead. So give that a try. All right, so we see a question from Raphael. How do I color code the rest of the channel in Cubase 12? All right, so let's say we are in our project. All right, and let's say if we go to our mix console, we could have the colors kind of automatically carry over here. And this is a preference that can be set. So if you go to your Cubase preferences and go to user interface, track, and mix console channel colors, here you could choose to not colorize the mixer channels. So if you have it look like that and you want the colors to be carried over, just come right over here. Activate this preference for the mix console channel colors. Again, under preferences, user interface, track, and mix console channel colors. Check mix console channels and then hit apply. And then you'll see the colors automatically carry over throughout the tracks as well. And if you wanted to carry over into these particular tracks, you can come over to say, okay, I want it to be on the tracks as well. And now we can see the colors carried over on the track headings. Okay, Michael Teams wants people to whack the like button, and that enables us to continue to offer these live streams as a service so you guys can be empowered Cubase users. right, so just reading through some comments here. Okay, so we have a question. Is there a way to select a range of colors for selection of multiple tracks, or do I have to set them up individually? So if we wanted to, one of the things that you could do is, let's say if we have a number of tracks, so let's say, and there's a preference here. Again, it's near where we were before. So let's say when we go to our track and mix console channel colors, so we could just say, let's use the track's default color. So as I go to add particular channels here, I could just say, okay, I'm going to add, a number of audio channels, and they're all blank. Now, if I wanted to increment these as the tracks are added, we could just come over again to the preference and say, okay, I want to use the previous track color +1. And now when I come over and I add a number of audio tracks, we can use the previous track color of this, and it's going to automatically increment and add the colors accordingly like this. So it'll just kind of automatically change that. And let me see if there's a way in the project logical editor to do this. I think we could set colors. Okay, so we could all right, so I'll add a number. I'll take these tracks here that don't really have colors, and we'll say container type is equal to track, and we want to set color to increment. So let's see. So if we wanted to increment those, we can make them, we could take all the colors and just kind of increment them like that, or decrement, or set to a particular known value. But I don't think we could take a number of different tracks and automatically randomize the colors other than doing it as the track is added that I know of. All right. So we just see a question: is there a Steinberg alternative to pitch map? Is it possible to work around it with Vari Audio? So let me know what pitch map is. Vari Audio is obviously used for doing tuning, but let me know. Let me know if what exactly pitch map is. If it's more of a sampling thing, or for vocal like tuning correction for instruments. All right, so Patrick asks, Greg, on Cubase 13, what will be the update? Will there be more MIDI editing functions or more plugin focused? Which side they tracking more for composers or EDM or DJ? So I think I think you're fairly new to Cubase, but I think that you'll see that every version will have features for different workflows. So they're not going to do just an update that's just for composers, or an update that's just for people doing EDM or hip hop or of features. So it's always going to be a wide variety of features, so that regardless of what type of music, that you'll have new great functionality. But we can't really talk about the update until it's actually released. So. All right, so we see from Michael Teams, howdy Greg, received a Behringer X1 Touch as a gift. Now, how do I go about installing it in conjunction with the CC121 or any generic MIDI remote controller dinosaur out there still? So I would, just come over to the MIDI remote and I would set it up here. So click on your plus sign, and there's a number of Behringer X1 profiles that are available. And then you can just say, okay, I have my Behringer. We'll say it's a X1. And then you could just, select your input output port. And then at this point, just start moving, say, okay, I have like 8 faders. So I want to set faders and, move the knobs, and that will automatically populate the different areas. So once you have kind of the layout, and you could also kind of click on just the plus sign and say, okay, I want to come over here and let's add this. And, we could say, okay, I want to move this. So you could actually just move the fader. That will automatically increment. And then as we click here, you could just select the particular event. And then you could assign functions either by kind of right-clicking on the function and saying pick up for MIDI remote mapping, or just come over within here and find any function that you want it mapped to, whether it's quick controls or whatever particular function. But there are some floating around. If you wanted me to point you into a direction, I think Jazz Dude will probably share the link because he's always so good that way. But there are a number of X1 profiles for working in Cubase already done. All right, so we have a question. Does Cubase still have a transport section detachable? If so, how? I would like to see it on a second monitor. Yeah, all you have to do, it's the same keyboard shortcut as in previous versions to 10, is just hit F2. And then you could copy this, and that'll be your floating transport. So if you wanted to copy it to a secondary monitor, you could do that very easily. So just hit the F2, function 2 key, and then you could copy that over to your external monitor. All right, so we have a question from Traveler 604. ASIO latency compensation explain, please. All right, so a lot of times when people are working with, plugins on a particular track, so let's say if we come over to our mix console and on our master fader, we have plugins that are going to be kind of like, let's say, a multi-band compressor or two. So, the tax we pay for running kind of more, often more comprehensive and more complex plugins could be that, those plugins can add more latency. So we could see the latency when we come over here. We'll see that we'll have a channel latency mode. And we could click and see how much latency each of these plugins is costing. So the Imager is 119 milliseconds, 123, 123. So when we look at our inserts, we can see that, okay, that these plugins are causing latency. So now when we go to record on particular tracks, this will often be heard in the monitoring path if we're not using direct monitoring. So this could cause a delay. So if we have hundreds of plugins in our project that are causing these delays, instead of having to go through and find which plugins are causing the delays, we can just come right over here to the latency, the constrained delay compensation button. So what we could do now is just come over here, and this will bypass the plugins that are causing latency so that we could track without the imposed latency of the signal path. So if you're recording after plugins have been added that cause a lot of latency and that's causing problems for the recording process, come over here and just simply turn on constrained delay compensation, and all the plugins that cause latency are now bypassed. The plugins, and if we want those plugins to be activated in the mix again, simply deactivate that button. So that bypasses plugins that cause a lot of latency. All right, wonderful to see Madge Deepers on. Thanks for joining us today. Hope you're doing well and had a good holiday season. Okay, so we see from Daniela Tocan says, on last stream my question was not answered. What is the best method to layer in Cubase sounds? So we did answer this. Let me just revert. I will come over. Let's do a new project. So let's say if we do an instrument track, I'll start off with maybe a Halion Sonic SE. So as soon as we come over here, we'll start with maybe a Rhodes piano. So we'll come here. All right, so we have that. Now, this will be on, if I wanted to layer, let's say, a different instrument, I could come over here and just say, okay, let's go to Retrolog. So let's say, okay, I wanted to have a pad sound. Or let's say, okay. All right, so now if these are both selected, sounds like my JD800. All right, so, and if I wanted to at this point put these into a folder, so we will just take these and move to selected tracks to new folder, and we could say, okay, this is synth layer. So I could close this folder, and now, like, we don't hear anything. Now, if I wanted to layer solely within one particular instrument, Halion Sonic is really good for this. Now, we could see that these will be MIDI channels 1 through 16. So if I wanted to have maybe more of like a brass sound, so say synth brass. So right now, we'll just say this is on MIDI channel 2. I'm going to just put this to MIDI channel 1. And let's put maybe a strings on the 3rd. So we'll just come over. So now when we play, I'll just do a different string patch. All right, so now when I play, all right, so if I wanted all of these to be layered together, so we could just say, okay, I'm going to play one chord. And now if I wanted to edit the sounds, we could just come over to, let's say, mix. So let's say I want the brass to be and when I go to MIDI, I can say I want my brass to be an octave down. And I only want the brass to come in at certain velocity levels. So we could just say, okay, I want my brass to come in starting there. So if I hit it softly, or if I hit it hard, so I hit it softly, let's say with more velocity. And then if I still wanted to combine that with the other synth pad, we could just do that. So that's a couple of different ways of layering. So, and we did cover that a little bit in the last live stream, but if you wanted to describe a different way how you want it layered, just let me know. All right, so we have Tonic Vox checking in from Liverpool. All right, we have Mark Rabin on. Glad that you could make it today. Heartbreak Time Machine says, I did not know about the FX modulator. So that's a great one. See, the multi-band option in FX modulator is the revelation of the day for Gareth. So now. All right, and we have Rude Screen checking in from the UK. Okay, my chat field jumped. Let me find my spot where it was. Okay, so I think I'm back to where I was. All right, so we have a question. How do you convert an audio track into a MIDI track and why? So what you can do, so sometimes, you have more flexibility of editing in the MIDI domain. So let's say if I wanted to come to, let's say I want to go, and we could do this for monophonic sources. So if I wanted to go, just do this track, let me revert it so I don't have such ugly colors. All right, so let's say we have a monophonic source such as a vocal or a piano part. So I could come here, let's go to Very Audio. All right, so now we can see kind of what our bass is doing. So now what I want to do within the Very Audio editor, so as soon as we have this selected, I can now convert this. So it's not intended to work with like chords, just kind of a single monophonic part. So I'm going to say, let's create a new MIDI track. So now we could just assign this to a particular instrument. And then, if we wanted to, after the fact, say, okay, we wanted to make this major to minor or make this shorter, longer, augment the sound with like a synth bass part, we could do stuff like that. And that's the benefit of kind of converting the audio into MIDI. You have a little more flexibility from editing standpoint. All right, so you see Daniela is just asking about Unify and DaVinci Resolve. So I'm not a DaVinci Resolve user, but maybe if you could let me know if that was helpful for the stacking or layering of instruments. All right, so we have a question from the Heartbreak Time Machine. Is there a fast way to move expression/mod data from a MIDI clip to the track instead? You know, the MIDI CC data, you know, if we had CC data, so let's say if I have expression or modulation on this particular part, you know, for MIDI, these always would need to be in a container of some kind. So, you know, it's, you know, it doesn't go necessarily at the track level. It's going to be within the event itself. Now, if you wanted to separate it, we could go to the logical editor and say, okay, I want to extract to track. And we'll say type is equal to controller. And we're going to say type is equal to value 1, be modulation, and then we will add and say, or we want this to be value 1 is equal to 11. So now what we could do is just, if you wanted to decouple the MIDI CCs from the notes, I could just come over here and we could just extract. And now this would just contain my expression and modulation data just in this empty part. So, but you know, it's not going to be necessarily at the track level. One other thing that you could do, if you wanted to set like a particular modulation or expression and store it in the track, I guess we could do it this way. If you go to MIDI insert and then say we want to go to MIDI control. So at this point, we could say I want every track to start off my modulation for my orchestral instrument at 100, and I want expression to start at 66. And now, as the track plays, every time the track plays, these using the MIDI control plugin, these values could automatically be there as kind of a starting off status point. So let me know if that would work for you. Okay, so you see Patrick is having a wonderful day. That's great. All right. Gareth has credited me for inventing elastic Cuban jazz. It was all my time spent in Key West listening across the Atlantic Ocean there to Caribbean. All right. So you see Danielle's so about the layering. So I don't have a license of contact on this computer. But let me know if what we did in the Halion Sonic SE would work. All right, so we have a question from Patrick. In which version Cubase first introduced a MIDI logical editor? So I think it was actually Cubase 1 for Atari. And there was kind of a predecessor to it in Pro 24, which was, the generation before Cubase, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, the developer that came up with it for the Atari, Werner Kracht, still at the company. I think he's retiring soon. But yeah, he's been, his name is on the very first About Cubase screen. Legendary developer. So it's kind of his brainchild with that. but I think it was version 1 Atari. All right, so we see Westar, just saying he's back after some time out from making music, and Greg is the man. Thank you, and we're glad to have you back. So we see, hey Greg, hope you're doing well. I was curious if there's a way to use the project logical editor to create a macro to add a specific instrument. For example, piano VST I use most frequently. So I haven't found a way to take the project logical editor and have it actually kind of instantiate a particular plugin, so I don't know of a way to have it insert a track. I think probably, a fast way of doing this is, if you just kind of come over here to VST instruments. I know it's not something that you could necessarily just kind of click on, but if you say, okay, I really want the grand and just, drag it over, that's like a fast way of being able to introduce different piano instruments. So you say, okay, I want my retro log here, so I'll just drop it in. So you could just kind of drag and drop, and if you wanted to just double click right from Media Bay, that's another way, but I know it's not something you can just hit one button and automatically trigger that particular instrument to load, but I'll make sure to mention that to the team. All right, so we see Gareth has to run. Thanks for joining us. All right, and Mark Winslow wants to remind everyone to don't forget to hit the like button. All right, so we see, can I use my Pro Tools plugins in Cubase DAW? So I don't think they make VST plugins, but you could contact them to see if they have VST versions. But generally, a lot of kind of native plugins aren't necessarily available to use, or like stock plugins from different DAWs aren't necessarily available to use in other DAWs. But if you have like third-party plugins, you probably already have VST3 versions installed. So there's, a good chance that all of your third-party plugins will automatically be available for you to use in Cubase and VST format, which would be probably a little more comprehensive feature-wise. All right, so we have from Phil Marin, is it possible to get accurate notation playing an electric guitar with Cubase 12? So like as we showed with the, with this, we could do it for a monophonic source, but it's not really intended to do like a guitar, like playing piano or guitars and being able to convert that into MIDI, which would then be used to convert it into notation. If you had a MIDI guitar or something like, the Fishman pickup, I think Fishman has a triple play pickup that you could just kind of throw on. And a lot of people really like that for MIDI guitar. So if you have a MIDI guitar, it could do it, but it's not going to take typical guitar recordings and convert that into MIDI or into notation. All right, so we see from Patrick, question, is it possible to select all the MIDI notes with a particular velocity? Like I want to select all the notes which have velocity of 80 to 75. What's the easiest way? Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look. All right, so I'll just come over here and let's just go to velocity. All right, so I'll just okay, so let's go to our logical editor and come over here. And let's go ahead and select notes that have a velocity between 75 and 80. So we're going to choose select, and then we want to select notes. And a MIDI note, value 1 is pitch, value 2 is velocity. And we're going to say is inside range 75 to 80. So now I come over here, hit apply. That will select all the notes that meet that particular criteria. So again, we want to choose for the function, select type is equal to note, velocity inside range is between 75 and 80. And then, and if I wanted to expand that to, let's say 100, we'll probably get some more choices. So that's how you could set that up. Let me know if that makes sense. All right, so we see David Reuter on and Kristen Parisi from Big Tent in Nashville. So thanks for joining us. I hope you guys all had a wonderful New Year, and thank you for your New Year message, Kristen. All right, great to see David M on. All right, so we have a question. Hey, Greg, when exporting multiple tracks / buses, is it possible to export them in a format they are in one run? So mono tracks export as mono tracks, stereo tracks export as stereo. So yeah, so let's come over here. All right, so say we'll have stereo track here. Stereo track, and I'll just copy over a couple monos from this project. Okay, so we want these to be exported as I want to maintain stereo and mono. So when we go to your file, go to export audio mixdown, and it really depends when you come here to the FX settings. So we're going to go to multiple. So on effects, you can just say, okay, I want to insert just the inserts, and strip. If we say groups and master groups, generally that would mean that's going to go into stereo effects and stereo and do like a stereo output and stereo processing on the output. So we're going to say inserts and slots. So I will come over, I will just export these. After the export, we're going to put in create audio tracks. So we could do this. I'm going to set my left and right locators. So now we'll export. And if we make this dry, for instance, we'll see our two stereo tracks. All right, let me just set up my export audio mixdown correctly. All right, so we do multiple. I'm going to take all of my audio tracks and disable dry. All right, so then we see our mono tracks as mono, our stereo tracks as stereo. So, but it's when you, and let's say if we do this and we choose on this to do inserts and channel strip, and we do the same. that once we apply the processing, that the processing then could automatically be based upon the different effects that are on the particular channel. So just come over and you want to just, when you do the export, just select the processing as disabled dry, and then mono channels will stay mono, stereo channels will stay stereo, etc. And again, it's really just based upon whatever processing you've chosen for that, whether if the processing, if you have the track going to a stereo effects end, then it's going to export. If you include that stereo effects, it'll export it as stereo to maintain the same sound. All right, so we see David as Kristen Parisi, and David got his daughter Dominique going in Cubase. That's wonderful. And we hope to see her on a live stream. Please tell her to say hello when she's on a live stream. All right, so we see a question, any update to Chord Circle? So I think, when you look at this and, we see the, as soon as we go to, let's say, when we look at this, I'm not sure, so we can see the circle of fifths, and you could select, different chords directly from here. So I'm not sure if there's any updates so that it really, so we have kind of based on proximity, or if you wanted to just, come over here and select, different chords, but you could do that very easily. So let's say even if we go to add a chord track, so I'm not sure if there's anything that's needed to be updated with this, with the chord circle. It's kind of just showing, the circle of fifths. So you could just come over here and toggle what is kind of your primary chord. So you could say this is 1, and then you could just go around the circle of fifths like that. So let me know if there's anything that you needed it to be updated for. But I don't think there's anything that needs to be added for it. But let me know if there's something that you need. All right, so we see, all right, so Benny is just saying the bass amp is king. So yeah, the VST bass amp, if you haven't played with that, it's definitely worth playing with. So you'll see it under distortion and go to the VST bass amp. So I have numerous ampegs in my collection, and it sounds great. So I tend to use this over other Ampeg plugins, even within our own Yamaha family. All right, so I see a question. Can Cubase be Huey controlled by control surface? So certainly all you have to do to set up a Huey control surface is go to your studio menu. To studio setup, you can click on the plus sign, and then you'll see Mackie Huey, and there's a baby Huey as well. And just come right over here, tell it what MIDI interface that you're connecting your Huey to, so if it's USB or if it's connected into another MIDI interface, and then you'll be all set. So once again, go to studio menu, to studio setup, click on the plus sign and select Huey, and tell it where it's connected into your computer for MIDI communication, and then you're all set. All right, see, Michael Teams has granted my family and myself 1 gallon of banana nut ice cream. So thank you for that. It's very generous. All right, so we have Manos checking in from Thessaloniki. So he's joining the live stream, so thanks for joining us. All right, so we see Patrick. He sent over a piece he did. I haven't had a chance to kind of go through, and but I thought it sounded really great. So so he sent over a project over Facebook to me for a documentary. So, and he's learned Cubase with the help of the live stream. So. All right, so we have Esteban Carlos Benson says, thank you for doing this. Can you demonstrate what note expression is for? Okay, so let's say we'll just do a new project. Okay, so often what happens with MIDI, you know, for the longest time, MIDI, you know, was when we did certain controllers would only really have controllers based on the MIDI channel as opposed to MIDI notes. So that got to be a bit of an issue for a lot of people. So let's say if I have a chord, just find... All right, so I'll just go ahead and record a chord. So there's kind of a, you know, the original MIDI specification, you know, was done in 1982. All right, so now when I come here, we have a chord. So what we could do with note expression is to have kind of individual MIDI controllers on individual notes. So I want to take this middle note here, and I'm going to select panning. So I want this note to pan. All right, and let's say I want to take this note, and I want this note to come over here, and let's go to tuning. So I want this note to gradually... So at this point, we could just come over and say, okay, I want to go to resonance on this note. So we'll just say... And let's do cutoff. So now when we look at this, we could actually see kind of all of the different note expression data. So before, every one of these notes that have independent controls would have to be on separate MIDI tracks with separate MIDI channels, often loading up, you know, taking valuable multi-timbral resources. So now I could just kind of play this in. So we could now just come over here and have kind of note-based controller editing as opposed to just channel-based. And we can see, you know, this came out well before MIDI 2.0, and this is really probably one of the catalysts for, you know, making MIDI more expressive. So that's what note expression allows you to do. All right. All right, great to see Jeweler to Rocket on. All right, so just see from Daniela says, can you demonstrate layering with Halion in a contact library or some different instruments just to get a start? I do not see the 3 dimensions. So I don't have Contact on my library on my system, but as you saw before when I demonstrated with Retrolog and Halion Sonic SE, it's really the same concept that could be used. All right, so we see just a question from Patrick. So, Greg, how much do composers or big pop artists layer their tracks? Any lessons you learned? Can you share how they sound huge, what we miss? Sometimes, like I can remember talking with Elliot Shiner about this, who's like, probably one of the, he's not a composer, but probably one of the best mix engineers in the world. I mean, if you've heard Steely Dan Asia and Fleetwood Mac's The Dance and the Eagles, and he's like the guy, and he just keeps things incredibly simple. So instead of like layering 100 different sounds, he's like, I want one bass sound, I want one guitar sound, and I'm good, and I'll make it fit. And often you get into more problems layering more different elements, so I think composers will often find, particular things that maybe work for one particular session, and then they may repeat that and build that into their templates. But sometimes, and just like, a classic composition technique is like, when do you stop? You could layer forever, but after a while it may not sound as big. But if you kind of, bring stuff in and out and do arranging, I think is really critical. But, just make sure that each part has the proper amount of lows, mids, and highs, regardless of what frequency range it's in. And if it's kind of balanced, then it tends to layer in better with other instruments. All right, so we have a question. How can I zoom in Retrolog or change the size of windows? Like some instruments will allow you to kind of zoom in, like Halion, we could zoom, but I think Retrolog is going to be kind of a fixed size. So, it's going to be kind of a fixed size so that it works well with, different screen resolutions, so that you can see all of the controls. Sometimes if you zoom in and you're missing like the modulation matrix, then you're kind of like, oh, I could only see that. So it's kind of, intentionally designed to kind of show you all the controls that you really need to see in one viewing. So this isn't necessarily one of the plugins that's designed for kind of zooming in and out of. All right, so we see a question. Hey, Greg, Happy New Year. I'd like to know if there's a driver for my CMC Quick controller, which I just bought secondhand because not everything is recognized in the MIDI remote. Thanks a lot. So I think, I'm not sure if there's Apple M1 drivers, but there's still, I think, you could download the, I'll just go to the Steinberg website here. So I just did Steinberg CMC drivers. So say we'll do our CMC updates and downloads. And here's where you can find the drivers for all of I don't think it's going to work in. So it looks like it does do up to 10.2. I'm not sure if it's going to be Apple Silicon native, but that's where you could find the drivers for it right there. All right, so we see from Patrick question, Is there a way in Cubase to find what my sound is like? I want to see whether it's sine or sawtooth or square. You could probably just look at it. So let's say if we open up an instance of Retrolog, I'll just open up a new instance of Retrolog here. So let's say we come over and we're going to play just a so we could change kind of the waveform here, but let's say if you just go to your control room, and let's get to I'm just going to open up, I have this in my control room, just an insert. But if we say we want to come over to our oscilloscope, that you could kind of see the particular frequencies here. So let's say I'll just get rid of this one here. So I've just put on the oscilloscope and adjust it. So as we would change the oscillator type here. So try playing with the oscilloscope plugin, and after a while you'll recognize kind of what the different oscillators sound like. But, use the oscilloscope inside of supervision, and you could help do some analysis that way. All right, question. Does anyone know why my Halion Sonic SE, since I upgraded to Cubase 12 Pro, it's loading in Cubase, but there's no sounds in it? I tried everything by uploading the license and tried e-licenser USB. So if you're upgrading from like version 11, there is a newer version of Retrolog that works. So you might need to use the current Retrolog version for the licensing. So make sure when you go to the Steinberg download assistant. So sometimes people will just download the upgrade and like, oh, I have Retrolog already. And that's fine, but you could be running the version that's not for version 12. So make sure that when you go over here to your download assistant, that you're kind of all set with all that. So we'll come over to Cubase 12. And then you'll see Retrolog 2, so make sure you have the content and that you have the instrument set here as well. So make sure that you have 2.3.0 version, and let me know if that I think that will do the trick. All right, so we see question. Hi, Greg. Whenever I use monitoring on a track, I hear the instrument approximately 3 dB lower than what's getting recorded on the track. Any fix? It could be the pan law is set. So try going to your project setup. You could go to Shift S, and if we go to your project setup here under the project menu, if I get to the right menu, that would be helpful, and see where if you adjust your stereo pan law and see if that makes a difference. So it could be just your stereo pan law settings that are doing that. All right. So we see a question, can I use Cubase for podcast editing? If so, then how? So let's say if I wanted to, you could definitely do it. Wavelab is also a wonderful tool for that. But, if you have, let's say, let's say I'll just import some audio files here. Let me do a new project. All right, so let's say, or I'll just start, let's say we'll have like a music bed. So if you wanted to come over here, we could just say, I'll start off with this, so just basic audio editing for podcast stuff. Okay, maybe I have a music bed, and then I wanted to have a dialogue. So I'll just go import an audio file over here. So, and then once you have, your different parts, we could just say, okay, I moved this over here. I want that here. I want to set up kind of like ducking between my tracks. So I can say, okay, I want this track to compress as soon as we go over here. So let's get to our dynamics and say, okay, I want a compressor. And I want this to sidechain from this track. So every time that we hear
this Mario Andretti, Sebastian Bourdais, Dario, and you. The only person above you on that list now is AJ with 7. And so I asked you.
So, here we could just say, okay, I want it to, very quickly, every time that the dialogue comes in, I wanted the...
Which was an unbelievable group, into that group of 4-time champions.
So, we could do stuff like this. But if you go into Wavelab, so any of your basic editing, adding effects could be done. But Wavelab has some like really specific podcast functionality as well. So say if I just wanted to come over here, we just so when we do this, and it's not going to be necessarily following. Here I could say, okay, I wanted my introduction. And then we could have this automatically duck other tracks. So as soon as... So if we would just come over here, we could say, okay, let's just choose to duck, this particular track. So we could do stuff like that and kind of treat it more object oriented. So we say, okay, I just want my just to end as soon as the dialogue comes in.
You've moved from that group. So Scott Dixon joining us now,
and we can say, okay, I want to do like a little bit of a fade out as soon as that comes in. So I could just come over here and just kind of do a fade as soon as that the voice comes in.
So Scott Dixon joining us now, and this is I interviewed him Victor Lane for SportsCenter.
And then when you want to actually go and publish the podcast to different formats, you're going to be able to do it right over here. So you can say, okay, I want to come over here to my podcast, and this would have all your most of the podcast engines and host services that you could directly export to in Wavelab. So you could do it in Cubase, but Wavelab is really purpose built for that. And there is a special version called Wavelab Cast, which is, I think, like $100 ish. And that is really kind of intended for podcast editing. So check that out. All right, wonderful to see Tiago from Brazil. All right, so we see how to delete doubles in Media Bay. Every time I reverse anything, it makes a copy. My HD is so full. Any ways to restrict Cubase 12 to do that? So, if when you do a reverse, it may keep the original file, and it may just, check the particular name. But, anytime that you come over here, like, let's say if you just wanted to, once we have like particular media files in, you could always just say reveal in Finder. And then, Cubase will, show you, what's available or, what's going on in your Finder. So just click on reveal in Finder. Let me just come over and just find a particular file here. So you say reveal in Finder, and then it'll just take you right to that spot where you could delete the files. But, it's realize that when you do processing on files, it's going to keep the original file. I don't think it duplicates it, but then you'll have the reversed file and the original file in case you need to go back. So it's probably not a doubled file. All right, wonderful to see Nick on the live stream. All right, so we see question. Hi, Greg. When I set up a workspace, why does it not retain my rack and channel type filter view choices? When I open it in a new project, I save them as global workspaces. So I think some of the aspects of the mix console, depending on like if particular tracks are or aren't present in a particular song, may not be carried over. But one of the things that you could do is, let's say, okay, I have this as my active project. So I'm not sure if you've added, if you wanted, so if you're starting from a template, you could just add configuration. So let's say I wanted to come here and I wanted to see my channel strip. I want to see the gate and compressor open on every single one of the channels. All right, so if I come here, I'll just activate quick link. Okay, so now we have this. I'm going to save this as configuration. So let's say, okay, I want this to be 1. And let's say I wanted to see my sends and inserts and sends available here. So I'll just add okay, so we'll just now add this as a configuration. So now when I go back to 1, we'll see our racks configured. So some of this is going to be saved at the project level, because you may have elements that are not in a project. So that's why, global things are, it's kind of a difficult balance sometimes, because, you may have a global project workspace set up, but elements that aren't available in different projects. So, but if you wanted to save your mixer configurations, try saving it within the mixer. So you could have your custom views here just by adding your different configurations. And if you're starting with a template, then all of your configurations can automatically be kind of preserved right over there. So I'm going to blow off. I'm going to have a call from Robin Hood Bryant. He was the guy who did the first ZZ Top records. I'll call him after the live stream. Wonderful engineer based in Texas. All right, so Phil Marin asks, says, hi, Greg. How often do we have live chat, which is going to be the next? So we usually do the last live stream of the month. So I think it's maybe a Tuesday, the 30th or 31st. So whatever the last live stream of the month, we'll have kind of a 2-hour live stream, and then 2 or 3 hours. Sometimes our last Zoom social meetup lasted for 4 hours, but we could do that the last live stream of the month. So I think it's going to be, I'll look at my calendar quickly. I think it's the 30th or 31st. So it looks like the 31st of January. That'll be the next time we do kind of a Zoom social meetup. And we'll post it on the Hangout on the 31st. All right, so we see from Tiago, it just says, report free warp markers disappear sometimes when I open and close projects repeatedly. It only happens a few times. Also, warp bars appear dotted instead of yellow line. Why? All right, so make sure also when you're doing kind of free warping, let's say if we're here, and I'll just select a number of different tracks. Okay, so depending on your version, if we, let's say, go to our free warp here, all right, it could depend on your zoom factor. So let's say I have my warp markers here and I zoom out a bit. You may not see the warp markers depending on the zoom level, because otherwise it could just, be entirely yellow, like a yellow wall, which would be extra annoying. So now, as soon as I come over here, let's say if we select all the events and I go to my zoom or my free warp tool, we don't see it, but as we zoom in here, we could see the warp markers just appear. So make sure, check your zoom level, and that could sometimes make the markers appear as if they're not visible now. Sometimes they are. So it could really depend on the level of zoom. Otherwise, you see kind of just solid yellow line of warp markers, which doesn't do you much good at that zoom level. All right, so we see question, are there new instruments in Cubase 12? So, Pad Shop and Retrolog have been updated. A new Halion Sonic SE sound set was added. So if we go to add an instrument track and this is called Verve. So it's kind of a very, like attack piano with atmospheric pads. So if you wanted to come over here, we could just open up Verve. So if I just wanted to come over here, and then if we wanted to, come over, is just say, okay, now as we, so as soon as we play this, and so what Verve is going to allow you to do is you could have kind of a texture, a piano, and different effects, and you could blend kind of between, I want a distant piano, I want more compression, I wanted to go to my texture, and you could just say, okay, I want, and I want to add more effects on this. So you get kind of a very cool atmospheric piano, and I'll play a little bit of a project using it. It's like just a perfect kind of pad sound, just so you can hear it in action.
Told your daddy, do you recall? Do you recall the day we first met? That was a long, long time ago. It was 7th grade in the school parking lot, waiting on our yellow coach to ferry us home. You looked my way and your heart shone through. It caught my breath.
So just in context.
Even now I'm so in love with you, just like a long, long time ago.
Take it out because it just sounds like that glue that's often missing on tracks.
The day that we went seems like a long, long time ago. And our first kiss, there was no regret. Right after that Garth Brooks show, you told your daddy and
So really beautiful instrument to kind of layer in with your productions. Okay. Okay, so you see a question from Vali. I have a preset with 4 to 6 plugins on mono input 1 UR22C, but when I route it to a track or to monitor, there's no input or sound even when recording. I don't know what's wrong here. So it could be that if try going to your studio setup and see if you have direct monitoring turned on. So if you're not hearing the particular sound, try toggling your direct monitoring status. So you may not hear the effects if direct monitoring is turned on, because then it's going to process only using the hardware DSP of the UR22C. Let me just, yeah. So, but you may not hear the monitored sound with the effects until direct monitoring is engaged. All right, so a question from John Smith. Hi, Greg. I'm on Cubase 12, Windows 10. I want to know if I can remove the name of the track on the MIDI event. It's a tab just below the ruler. In the MIDI editor view, it's blocking a portion of the ruler. Okay, so let's say if we're here. All right, so I think if you may see, I think it's probably this part that's maybe blocking. So I think if we go to this icon right here where we see it almost looks like two boundaries, almost like two flags. So try just turning that on and off right there. And once that's turned off, then you shouldn't obscure the ruler view. So let me know if that helps. All right, so see Joel de Rocket says he did a live concert for 1 hour and a half using Cubase. Thanks to Greg for solving a couple of stuff for me, and it went perfectly. So congratulations. Great job. It's always fun to have everything work. It often takes a lot of hard work to make it look easy. So it's good to be prepared. All right, so we have Emmanuel Maureen wishing everyone a Happy New Year from Quebec City, Canada. Thanks for joining us. All right. So you just see from Daniela, can you repeat this? I searched it. It's only possible with the F2 key, not somewhere in settings. I guess this is with the floating transport bar. So if we go to, I think we could also open it with the transport menu that you could just say, transport commands. Let's see if it's in here, or transport panel. So just go to transport menu to transport panel, or just hit F2. All right, so we see how do you pan MIDI notes like hi-hats in the key editor? So, generally when you're doing stuff in a key editor, so let's say if I come, so let's say we'll do, I'm not sure if, we'll see if Groove Agent does it. So, but if you have hi-hats, you could just come over here. So it's just, let's just find a, all right, so if we come, all right, so we could do this with standard kind of, I'll just switch to the drum editor. Okay, so let's say we have this, and we'll just put this on repeat. Okay, so if we wanted to just go to MIDI message, let me repeat that. So you could do, and this could do everything for the particular MIDI message, but we can say, okay, I just want to do MIDI panning. If you don't want to do that, you could also So let's say I want to do a one-shot pan. If you wanted to do this also, you could just say within the MIDI editor for VST 3.5 instruments, you could just come over here and just say, so if with like Groove Agent, you could just do it like this, and then you could pan each drum independently. So now if I just wanted to listen to it, or if you didn't want to do that, you could also just do it on the instrument itself. So you could just say, okay, I want to just take these hi-hats and I'll just read and write the automation. And you could just automate the panning as well. So a couple of different ways of doing it. We see it's minus 15 degrees centigrade in Finland. Good luck staying warm. All right, let me just get back to my chat field jumped on me. Sorry, I'm so far behind. We have lots of questions today. All right, so you just see a question. All right, so you see Match Deeper says, hi, so I hope you're doing well and had a wonderful holiday season. Happy New Year. Thanks for being on the live stream. All right, so Patrick's question. Greg, on a mix window, we filter things by show only having data, and there's options inside cycle range, but sometimes empty tracks also appearing. Is there a way to see only tracks with data under cycle range? Okay. Let's give it a shot. Just revert this. Okay. And let me just add some other tracks. Okay. So we filter things by show only data, and there's option inside cycle range, but sometimes empty tracks also appearing. Is there a way to see only tracks with data under cycle range? Okay. Okay, so let's say our cycle range is here, and we only want to see tracks that have data. So let's say if we go to our mix console window, make sure one's not already there. So let's say, all right, so might be able to do this with the Project Logical Editor. So let's come over here. And let's just say our position is inside cycle. All right, so let's say if we come over here, we want to select only events. Okay, so we'll say inside cycle, and let's do a post process of channel and track configurabilities of show only. Show only tracks with selected events. All right, so let's say if I'm here, and then let's go ahead and just okay, so let's say I have my cycle set here, so I'm going to select all the events. I may have to reverse these, but we'll give it a shot here. So let's see. And then I want to show only the selected channels and then go open the mixer. So see if this does a trick. All right, let me try this here. See if this will do the trick. All right, so I'm going to choose to sync the project and mix console here. So I'll undo. Okay, so let's say nothing is selected now. We set our visibility here to sync the project and the mix console. So let's come over here. Let's see if I turn that sync off. me try just do one preference. I think there's an event selection. Track selection follows event selection. Okay. Now let's see if we can get this to work as expected. I think I'm close. I could play with it some more, Patrick, if you want to email me. But I think that you could set it up with something similar to that, but I could play around with it some over the weekend. If you want to reach out to clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, wonderful to see Jean-Marie Horvat on. Hope you're doing well, buddy. All right, and we have Ramona's Diaper checking in from Southeast Michigan. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we have Sakis just saying, hi, Greg, greetings from Germany, though I'm Greek. Thanks for sharing your wide range of knowledge regarding Cubase. Thanks for being on the live stream. Glad to help. All right, so we see Sakis says, I do voiceovers and although it might sound kind of silly, I struggle with my levels. When I export in mono, I usually deliver in mono for my clients. You know, what I would do if you had a number, let's say we had a mono, and this is your voiceover file, and let's say you just have it kind of split up, and we're at different inconsistent levels. So let's say, okay, we're here. And let's just say we have these clips all at various volume levels. And you want this to overall be consistent. So, you know, the one thing you might want to try is just selecting it here. And if you want to go to like a particular loudness level, is just to come over and you right click, go to audio to processes to normalize. And here you can say, I want to do it at, you could do it at loudness units and say, okay, I want to do this at minus 14 LUFS. And you could now just kind of, select all of your files and just, go to a particular processing point and say, okay, I need these all to export, and then just choose to normalize and set your final level there. And then you could normalize based on that. So I would give that a try, and that may save a lot of tinkering and make it super easy for you to work with as well. So just a continuation of questions. I always like to process my recording, compress and EQ that stuff. Here's my struggle. Place my export to level is much higher if not clipping. How can I troubleshoot this issue? So I would, definitely still check out the normalize, and that could get you there pretty quickly. All right. So we see Sable is on. She's like number 83 in San Francisco, and this is at 2:16, so I'm an hour and 15 minutes behind. I'm going to diligently try to catch up, but glad you could join us today, Sable. All right, so I see from the Calvin's family, my Cubase Pro 11 keeps crashing. What can be the solution? So, I would try to isolate it to some different things. So one, things that could cause Cubase to crash a lot is going to be third-party plugins. So see if you're running any third-party plugins. If you notice that it's kind of blue screens, that could be indicative of hardware. I would check if you're on... you don't say which operating system you're on, but it could be something like a display driver that could be causing issues. So I would check out. There's a utility called Latency Mon from Resplendence Systems, RESPLENDENCE, Resplendence Systems, and check that out. And that could point out if it's going to be kind of a hardware configuration that could cause it. All right, Mark Rabin just says, hi, Greg. He's happy he made it today, so we're happy he made it as well. All right, so we see from Senor Rocktai. Hi, Greg. I don't know what happened to my question. I need to use 2 keys to mute 2 tracks. It doesn't work now. Okay, so I'm not sure if you're using, I need to use 2 keys. I'm not sure if you're using keys on like a MIDI keyboard of some kind. But if you wanted to mute selected tracks and do it from a keyboard, we could do that with the MIDI Remote. So let's say if I want to come over here to my Nectar, and I will go ahead and say, okay, I want it to create keys, and I'm just going to hit buttons. So I'm going to go to this track, and let's say I hit this button, and I want to add another button here. But I want this key to, when we go to our MIDI Remote editing, I'll say I want to mute the sub kick, so we can come over here and say, okay, let's go to so I'll just say pick up for MIDI remote mapping. So we'll say the mute, and we'll apply the mapping there. And let's say for this, I wanted to right click, pick up for MIDI remote mapping, then click apply. And now I could just use those particular keys to mute those particular tracks. So let me know if that's what you're trying to accomplish, but I think I may have missed part of the earlier question. If you want to re-ask again, we'll see if we can get to it. All right, so we have a question. How can I import a MIDI track without having to create a new project? Otherwise, it imports buggy. All right, so go to Preferences, and go to Cubase, and then go to Import MIDI file. So we're going to go to Preferences under MIDI file. All right, so All right, so just want to see. All right, so it's, I think when you go to import a MIDI file, you're prompted to ask, let's say, let's go to import MIDI file. And it'll ask you, do you want to create a new project? And just choose no. And then you can just simply, let's see if I have any on my desktop somewhere. So now at this point, I could import the MIDI file without doing that. So all you have to do is when prompted, if you want to create a new project, choose no. So again, once come over here, say import MIDI file. Do you want to create a new project? No. And then you could import the MIDI file right there, and that's where you'll see the MIDI file be imported to. Okay, so we have a question. Is there a way to force all pan sends to follow the pan of the track it is on? So let's see. I think it might be a preference. So I think if you have this preference activated as tracks are added, that the link panners for new tracks will automatically be turned on. So try to see if that is activated. So I think that's the preference you want under VST. So as new tracks are added, that the panning will automatically be linked. Yes, we see Jazz Dude did win a Nuendo upgrade because Jean-Marie was a part of a trivia question we did for our 250th live stream. And maybe our 300th live stream we'll do in our giveaway. So you see from Nick, so for our Christmas live stream, so I haven't seen the codes come through, but I'll follow up and maybe early next week. I'm sure there's a bunch of people getting caught up on emails. All right, so we see, Greg, how to set up MIDI Remote. My Privia PX5S doesn't get to trigger the notes or keys. So make sure that when you go to the MIDI Remote setup, if you wanted to come over here, you could add a new MIDI Remote there. Now, sometimes you may want to make sure that when you go to like the settings, you may not want the keys to be triggering MIDI Remote because that could take priority over the particular notes. So if you find yourself in kind of a situation where maybe you want it to kind of restart, like say, I wanted to get rid of this particular script. And at this point, you could just delete that particular script and that should free up the MIDI communications. But let me know if that is kind of what you want to do, if the MIDI notes are kind of being blocked because you set up a MIDI remote or not. All right, so we have a question from Jean-Marie. I have a dumb question. Why does my macro duplicate selected track with data kills the info from the source? Shouldn't I just leave the original track alone on the duplicate? Would be empty. Okay, so let's give it a shot. Okay, I'll just go to a different project here quickly. Thanks for all the great questions. And again, if you've learned a new tip or trick, make sure that you hit the like button And if you're not subscribed to the channel, you can be notified of different live streams as they occur. Okay, so why does a macro duplicate selected track with data kills the info from the source? Okay, so let's say we look at this, we're going to have our drum loop. So let's go to the macros. All right, duplicate selected tracks without data. Okay, so it looks like this is still playing and all the settings are carried over. So let's say if I wanted to do it for this, where we have our piano part. And I'll run the same macro. So duplicate selected tracks without data. So it seems like everything is kind of working as expected on my end. Jean-Marie, let me know if I did something differently than what you did, or if I misunderstood. All right, so did you see, so Jazz Dude, so I did send you the, so the code for the Nuendo upgrade. So check for an email from me, but you should have that. I think when you sent me the email, I responded, I think that same day. But let me know if you don't see it. And again, you could email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, so we have a question. I've been trying Cubase Pro 12 on Windows, and now I'm buying the license. My question is, what type of VST plugins work best with the latency compensation feature? USB 3.1 interface. So, any of the plugins will work. Some plugins will run at lower latencies or have a particular live mode. So there's really nothing you need to do. Some plugins will just take a lot of processing to do, especially like multi-band type of plugins, but any plugin should work. And if it's if the latency is too high, you could just simply at that point have it bypassed for you. All right, so we have a question from Diego. It says, when I use my QC quick controller to switch between channels, the left arrow, right arrow, and also same function with the Stream Deck, my Cubase crashes. What can I do to remedy this? This is recent. So when I'm just kind of doing it on my control, I haven't had any crashes at all. So I'm just kind of switching between my channels here using the same function, using my up and down keys. So see if you're just doing it like this to switch between channels, if you use your up and down keys between, see if you get the same results, because that's what Cubase is basically doing from that remote control script. But maybe it's something with like a MIDI reset message, but see if you hold down the left, just the up and down arrow keys, if that actually is functioning correctly for you and behaves differently than when you instantiate it or start it from the QC or the Stream Deck. I don't have any problems in my systems. My Stream Deck on my personal computer, but I don't have any issues with that. All right, see how we're doing on time. So thanks for all the great questions. All All right, so a question. The library sounds which you get with Cubase 12 Pro, are they copyright free? They are. So you have free use to use them in your next #1 song without paying Steinberg royalties for it, unlike many other content. So we have a question from Benny. Is there a big difference in sound quality between the UR824 and the AXR4U? So the AXR4U is a 32-bit 384K converter, so it's a kind of a couple generations of conversion beyond. It also has, built-in DSP is upped a little bit, so it has the Rupert Neve Silk processing on the mic breeze, physically modeled on the DSP, plus a more capable EQ and compressor. So it does sound a little better, and that's why it was a lot more money. So. All right. So we see from the soundbar, hey, question. Does it make any difference of the performance of the project when which drive in I save my Cubase files, fast versus slow? So, if you're doing a lot of orchestral stuff and you're loading up, tons of orchestral samples, then it can make a difference when loading it up. Usually hard drive speed hasn't been the problem or the bottleneck in a while. If you're playing back 2,000 tracks of audio, then your hard drive speed may come up to be a factor. If you're doing a couple hundred tracks, even slower hard disks can do that quite easily. Sometimes accessing samples repeatedly over and over and over very fast for sample libraries, that can make a difference, but playing audio isn't as critical. All right, so we have a question. When will Cubase 12 only run with VST3 plugins? I have a couple of plugins which are only VST2. So I think we'll support VST2 for, I think they announced last year there's going to be for 3 more years. So it may still be backward compatible. So currently VST2 plugins, the software development kit won't work with Apple M1 processors. If you're on a Windows platform, then it's less of an issue. So I think it's still going to be a couple years before it happens. So. All right, so see, just kind of a further question. If you were to use one of the drum patterns and release this song, would Steinberg stipulate that you have used their drum pattern and library sounds and therefore constitute a copyright violation? So no. So everything that's included, it's included in free and fair use for you. So. All right, so we see Mark Rabin's dog Stella says hi and woof. That's good. All right, so we see Gerald Ely says note expression is his tip of the day so far. All right, so Toadlick asks, what is replacing the dongle? I'm so uninformed. So with version 12, previous versions of Cubase required a USB-E licenser. And with version 12, it went to a new license management system that didn't require the USB-E licenser. So that's what it's kind of referring to. Right. All right, so Jarlith Quinn just wants to wish everyone a happy new year. So you could always say it throughout the whole year. All right, so we see from Harry Olive asks question. Hi, Greg. I'd like to control a node value and FX modulator pitch shift with the CC MIDI controller. Can you show, please, if possible? All right, so give it a shot. All right, just seeing if we could. All right, let's see if we go to the remote control editor, if we can capture that. Yeah, so it doesn't look like we could control the node here that I can see. Yeah, so I think it's kind of intended to, once you have the particular node, that it's always going to be kind of played back. So it's always going to be doing the same thing. So that is, in essence, it's automation that it's doing. But I don't know of a way to switch that to control via MIDI CC that I see. Sorry about that. All right, so we see question, Spectral Layers 8. How can I change the language setting? All right, so let's say, come here. Let's go to Spectral Layers. I think it's going to be under Preferences. And then you'll see Language, and then you could switch the language there. So again, under Edit to Preferences and under the Language field, Harry. All right, so we see question on Spectral Layers 8. I have a selection on an audio file and added a plugin. How can I play and hear the loop in real time while changing the plugin settings? All right, so let's say do this. All right, so say we'll take this and yeah, I may have to I'm sorry, I may have to reinstall my Spectral Layers, Harry. I think I just have the Spectral Layers 1 showing up for some reason, but but should be able. But I could show it on Friday's live stream. I'll make a note to show that. Sorry about that. And I'll see if I can get Spectral Layers 8 installed as well as 9. All right, so we see from Scambot Terminator, hi Greg, Happy New Year to everyone. Question, how can I render and place multiple tracks with the same MIDI data at the same time? I tried highlighting each track, but only the first track highlighted renders. Okay, so let's take a look. Okay, so let's say I have piano, and here I'm going to have bass. And I have some guitar, some strings, and piano. So I'm just going to select the different events here. Let's get to our render in place. And I'll just get to my render settings. And we'll just come over here. I'll just do my channel settings. I'll mute the source event. So I'll just say render. And then each of my parts is automatically just been rendered accordingly, just like that. So just try selecting them and go to edit to render in place, and that should render whatever events are selected for you. All right, so we see from Enrique, I would like to insert an audio track from an artist of electronic music as a reference track to build mine. But I need to know how to adjust the tempo of my project. So if you wanted to figure out kind of what the tempo of, like, an electronic project is, so say I'll just come over here. We have kind of an electronica piece. All right, so let's say. All right, so if you want to find the tempo of that piece, and if you need to use a tempo as a reference, you can come over and go to your project and go to tempo detection and just say analyze. And then you could just kind of find a downbeat. And you could say this is. So that's how you could find kind of the tempo for you. So give that a shot and let me know if that will serve for your reference needs. All right, so we see just upgraded to 12 Pro. Really excited for new warping of multiple tracks. What are some of the other great 12 Pro features I should check out? You know, the Verve piano. I think being able to also just have a chord track here. So let's say I have a chord track. This is probably my favorite feature. Just kind of take a track down to the chord track, and it will do its analysis and automatically tell you the chords that are being used in the particular project. But play around with the FX modulator, Razor. So there's all, I think we did like a 2-hour live stream kind of going through all of the different new features in Cubase 12 when it was released. So you could check that out. It was, March of last year. So, and you can see it on the Cubase YouTube channel. See, Mark Rabin says he loves Cubase, but he wishes there's a view that was less geeky from when he's being creative. So, just don't touch the other stuff, So, Stevie Wonder is able to, write great stuff in Cubase without being hindered by the user interface just because he probably chooses not to be distracted by it. So, but know that when you need it, it's there in the middle of your creative spurt. All right, wonderful to see Michael Pierce on. Glad you can make it. Sable Winters is immediately asking for soup recipes. So it's probably raining and a bit cold in San Francisco in the Bay Area. All right, so we have a question. Is there a way to set up external instruments, Tyros 5, so that you can render the MIDI tracks from it? So really the only way to do it is, it's because it's the limitation of the sounds are not being generated in the computer. It's being generated in the Tyros. Is if you go to your audio connections and just set it up as an external instrument. So you can come over here and say, okay, I have my Tyros. And what you need to do is to connect it into your audio interface, into 2 inputs. And then, when you go to render in place, and it's probably only you probably don't have enough outputs on your Tyros for all the different instruments, so it would be mixed in the Tyros. You could solo each track in your Tyros and record it in. And that could be the most, maybe not the most fun thing to do, but it's kind of the reality of working with externally generated MIDI tones. So, but definitely, start off using it as an external instrument. All right, so we see Jero just says, I'm an Ableton user switching to Cubase. Since Cubase is a lot more scalable, I compose trailers. Any tips on streamlining the learning process? Realize that you don't have to figure out everything. Some people get into a bit of paralysis where they're, I don't know what this button does. And it's like, you may not need to know what that button does. Just kind of get your tracks done and, get through particular workflows and learn how to do this one particular function. And, ask any particular questions that you have in these live streams and go to cubaseindex.com and you could check out, there's probably 24, maybe 25,000 questions-ish on there that have been covered, and go to the Cubase Nation Discord. And, you have a wonderful community that's here to help you and wonderful resources. So take advantage of that. But just being on a live stream, you're probably learning all sorts of great tips and tricks that will speed up your workflow. But any particular questions you have, just ask in the live stream or send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, so is there a question? I see a question. Is there a way to modify what tools appear and the order when I right-click? So no, it's going to be kind of a fixed thing. That way it's kind of the same experience for everyone. So there isn't a way to customize that. You know, there's a lot of things in Cubase that can be customized, but, you know, that's kind of a constant aspect that will be consistent throughout. So. All right, so we see Spike Williams. So I just bought a Halion 5, hopefully some cool jazz kits. Are you able to give some of the functionality of Halion 5 versus SE? So, you know, the full version of Halion 1 can sample. And, you know, even, you know, I'm not sure if you have Halion 5 or Halion 6, but, you know, Halion 6 is the current version for the last couple of years. But that also allows you to build and create your own virtual instruments. So when we go to open up inside of Halion Sonic SE, we could think of this as being more of, you know, the playback engine. So as soon as we go to our Halion Sonic SE, you know, like we can't necessarily get under the hood as much. So we could do all of this, but let's say if I open up a similar sound inside of Halion, just get this open here. That when we go to load a particular sound, you know, we could, and we go to edit that, you know, here we have like every fundamental building block of the samples, the zones, the different forms of synthesis. So this is really kind of like, you know, getting under the hood in capabilities and being able to create your own instruments and sample your own instrument. So, you know, and so there's wonderful depth of control in editing in it. And congratulations, Spike, on getting Halion. All right, so we see John Costigan has a problem on direct monitoring solved, so that's great. All right, just jumping back to, sorry, Mike. All right, so slowly catching up. All right, reading through comments about AI music and musicians and musicianship. Okay, read through comments still. All right. Seeing discussion of Genesis live concerts. And all right, so you see from PZ136 says, update still having problems with my licenses. I reinstalled Cubase 11 and my interface now shows up in Cubase 12. I've had a ticket open for weeks, no answer yet. So I think this was maybe, did you do the reinstallation of I think this is, if memory serves, a UR824. But, let me know if you reinstalled the extension yet, as opposed to just the driver. All right, so we see from Diego, says, are the questions on this chat being answered, or did I misplace my questions? I don't think I saw a question from you, Diego, but, feel free to ask it again. Sometimes some questions don't make it into the chat field, even though it shows up on your computer. Sorry about that. Hang on just 1 second. Get a sip of water. All right, so we have a question. How to optimize your PC to work with Cubase 12 Pro. So that could be pretty involved. So there is, if you go to the steinberg.net/forums in Cubase, there is kind of like a little article about it. But, check out Latency Mon is a really good choice. And I see that Jazz Dude has already been kind enough to post a link to it. And that has a lot... and that could show different vulnerabilities or culprits that could interrupt kind of your audio performance, such as, network drivers or display drivers, stuff like that. All right, so we have Oral Cole checking in from Jamaica. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to the live stream. All right, so we have, I see a question. Having problems loading a video on Cubase, is there a trick? AAC audio, so, a lot of times AAC audio is probably not the best thing. So what you want to do is there's particular codecs and containers. So let's go ahead, and if we just look for video support in Cubase, and there's an article on this. So realize that when you have a normal video file, there could be, I'll just do video support in Cubase, new window, Wavelab Dorco. So we do video support in Steinberg products here. So realize that, video files aren't like normal WAV files. So if we come over here, we could just say, okay, we need it to be, so we have codecs and containers. So you could check to make sure that you have the correct codec and container. And there's a number of freeware utilities. I think Handbrake is one that a lot of people use to convert into known container and codec combinations so that you could load that up in Cubase. But, realize that there could be 1,600 different, .mp4 file variations. So it's not quite as standard as WAV files because of the different codecs. All right, so we see Valley has takeoff to go record a concert. So good luck with that. All right, we see Gareth made it back. Okay, so we have a question. How can I randomize velocity of, let's say, a cymbal and a drum editor? I'm asking about doing it at one go instead of every single note. Let's say I would like to have velocity between 100 and 125 in a whole song. All right, so let's say we have our velocity here, and I want to randomize each of the velocities between 100, let's say 120 to 125. So we're going to go to our MIDI, to our logical editor, and let's set it up. So we're going to say we want to transform. Types are equal to MIDI notes, value 2, which is velocity. And we want to, let's say, okay, so we want to now take in here, so we want to take value 2, and we'll say set to random values between 120 and 125. So now, as we do this, and I'll just make it a little easier to see. So we'll say 90 and 125. Okay, we'll set to set random values, I'm sorry. 90 and 125. So now you could just, if you want it to be 120, now if it's only, let's say we have other notes and you only want the cymbal crash. So let's say I only want, a particular note. So let's say I only want like D sharp 1. Let's say that's our cymbal. So we'll say value 1 here is equal to D sharp 1. So we could put the pitch in. So now it's only going to, when we do this, it's only going to do the notes on, I'll just make this D1 to match this. So it's only going to do the velocity randomizing between on that one particular note and not other notes. So we can come over here, we can see the velocity randomized. When we come here and we run this, the velocity is not randomized, but only on my cymbals. So once again, you want to choose transform. Type is equal to note. You could choose the actual note under value 1. And then in the event transform actions, you want to say Value 2, set random values between 90 or 120, 125, 100. Let's say 115, 125. And now you could just apply and randomize the velocities and affect only the velocities on that one particular note that you've defined. All right, great to see Alexander Plasko in. Thanks for joining. Okay. So I see, and I think this question on the UR824, does it come with Yamaha plugins for your 824? So yeah, you will get the RevX Reverb, you'll get Guitar Amp Classics, as well as the Morphing Channel Strip. And you get software native versions of those as well. Okay, reading through comments. Okay, still reading through some comments here. All right, I think I may have caught up. All right, so I know we had some questions that were mailed in, so let's get to those. All right, so I see we're at 140 likes. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so we had a question, and this came up in last week's live stream of how to add a label, and I was having kind of a brain cramp. So let's go ahead and take a look at that in the MIDI remote. So we can see that we have, I'll just go ahead and make this full screen so we can see that we're going to have like our quick, like when we go through different labels here, like as we're building our different devices. So let me just come over here. I'll just get out of the mapping assistant. So as we go to select a particular value here, and the question was last week how to get the labels besides something like QC, like if we wanted this to be send, and we don't, and instead of seeing the label quality control. So if we click at the very top here, we could now see kind of what the actual label is. So as we're here, just click right above the object and that will open the label. Now, when we go to assign this particular function to, so now when I go to assign this to, let's say our selected track to send for, so we'll come over here and I'll apply the mapping that we'll see that it will now switch from being labeled as QC to sends. So again, to add the label to the MIDI remote controls, just simply click right here above the controls, and then you'll see the label and whatever this particular parameter is assigned to, such as in our mapping assistant, we can just come over and say, okay, I want this to activate cycle record. So we'll say apply, and now we could just have the label automatically show what the function is when you're working on it. So that's how you could do that. All right, so we have a question. Can Greg discuss some ideas to make the vocal to sound close to the microphone? Is it more difficult to get a close feeling when recording in the studio with a studio microphone? So often when I think of close, that may often kind of go to, I often think of proximity effect, like if you get really close on the mic and you have more bass, and if you get farther away, it may sound, like less low end. So, if I had to, mimic something to make it sound closer, I may add a little bump of low end frequencies. So I may, come over here and just, figure out what the key of the song is. So let's say, okay, here I just drag my piano part and I can see that we're in the key of G. So when we go to EQ, one of the great things that you could do is just come over here. So say we go to our channel EQ, is just type in, instead of just the frequency, just come here and say, okay, let's do G3. Or maybe we could just type the note in. So say, okay, I want to go right over here to G2. And then we could just say, okay, I just wanted to. So instead of like knowing what the frequencies are, EQ based on. And maybe just dial a little bit of low end in. And then that could bring it up. But, it makes sense to kind of check out what the frequencies are and maybe EQ based on that particular frequency, and maybe add just a little bump of low end, and kind of that could make it sound like the singer is a little closer on the microphone. All right, so we had a question. I can't find out how to identify an audio event as a shared event. MIDI events have a little equal sign icon in the right. What have an audio event to identify a shared copy? All right, so we'll just do a new project here. So when we do shared copies with audio events, it tends to, if you want it to be similar to what we have for MIDI, so let's say if I come over here and I'll just drag this loop over. All right, so we have this event. So when we go to control or command kick plus K, and we make shared copies, for MIDI, we'll see often just a particular equal sign right up here, but we don't see that necessarily with the audio because we don't necessarily share audio events. We share audio parts. So to switch it to a part, I can come over here and just go to audio, and we'll say we want to say events to part. All right, so we'll go audio and events to part. So now if I copy this, so let's say I copy this and we choose to make shared copies, that we will see the little equal sign appear. Now, if I come over here and I adjust the amplitude of one event in a part editor, if I do a fade in or fade out, we'll see that these are all carried over into the actual other parts that are shared. So again, for audio events, they need to be transformed into audio parts. And then if you wanted to, transform those parts into events, again, go to audio and choose to dissolve part. And at that point, we could just we still see kind of the different changes applied here that will be carried over, but it's just kind of handled within the part editor. So if you wanted to dissolve all of the parts, we could just go right back. So there's a distinction with shared copies that don't necessarily translate to audio events, but they do for audio parts. So it looks like we could dissolve parts one at a time. All right, so second question related to shared copies. Is there a way to create a shared copy on existing events on the same and not shared, or do a workaround, for example, with a logical editor? So you can't necessarily take a copied event and then after the fact turn it into a shared copy. So it needs to be kind of done as it's created. So I don't know of a way, and I tried to play around with it, but I think to do a shared copy, you need to kind of, actually do the shared copy initially and not kind of retroactively or after the fact. So sorry about that. All right, so a question. Hello, Greg. I've received a project which is 24-bit 44.1. I imported all tracks and noticed a big difference in level between tracks. I heard loss of quality when you trim the tracks. What would be the best way to improve my gain structure, either increase or decrease the level of the tracks? Do I need to reconvert the bit rate? Thanks, Luis. So I haven't really noticed. Just come over here. Let's say if I import a file here. Let me or I'll go to a different project and we'll see if we notice a difference in quality. So I have a feeling like I've never really noticed a difference in quality in scenarios like this, but let me just see if I could just jump to this project here. All right, so this is going to be, I think 44.1 in this particular project. Yeah, so we're at 44.1. So kind of nice, squeaky clean, classical. Just kind of get our sonic bearings on it. So now I'm going to convert it to 48K. So just a sample rate conversion. All right, and we'll go ahead and convert the files. We'll keep our original files, and we won't keep it at the sample positions. So I haven't noticed, to me it sounds very similar. So I don't know if the change in quality is because of the sample rate conversion. I don't think it is, and maybe it's something else going on in the originally recorded files. All right, so we have a question. Is there any recommendations you could give on a wireless USB hub? My issue is I have a number of USB items plugged in, i.e. MIDI piano, sound card, multiple hard drives, etc., and I then end up bound and rooted to one spot. I was thinking it'd be easier to have a single dongle on my laptop that connected all of those devices. So I've never worked with a wireless USB hub. I would tend to try to avoid a wireless USB hub to just adds a multitude of variables of things that could go wrong. So I haven't done any research on it. I would personally kind of tend to stay away and maybe get a longer USB extension if you need it to be mobile. But I probably wouldn't recommend a wireless USB hub because especially, the speeds could fluctuate so much. So it wouldn't be the thing I would recommend. All right, so we see a question, can Spectral Layers 9 be used as an extension in the latest version of Cubase? It's registered on my laptop. When I open up Cubase, I can't select it as an extension of audio. So yeah, you could definitely see it right here. So shouldn't be any problems running Spectral Layers, so do it all the time. So now as soon as I double click on Sample Editor, we're in Spectral Layers. So no problems there. All right, another question. I'm using a Windows machine with a Scarlett 2i2 Focusrite sound card, and I want to play Cubase audio over my Neuro True Pro Neurosound Bluetooth headphones. However, I can only get it working when using the ASIO for all sound drivers, not Focusrite. Any suggestions? Well, if you're sending audio through the Bluetooth headphones, the Focusrite doesn't have a Bluetooth transmitter. So I would in Bluetooth headphones, I would tend to shy away because they introduce a lot of latency and they are fixed at only particular sample rates as well. So there's a good chance that your Focusrite interface isn't designed to work with Bluetooth headphones, and that's why you need to run it under ASIO for all, because it's using the Bluetooth audio driver as opposed to the Focusrite. So the Focusrite and most audio interfaces don't have a Bluetooth output because it can increase a lot of latency and limit you on particular sample rates. All right, so I had a question, and this was a follow-up question from the live stream on Tuesday. And this is about warping. It says, the problem I have shows itself only after the warp changes have been made on the events. The tests in the video are made between the actual changes. I could hear the audio change in audio very clearly when I edited multiple guitar mics. When I switched off the phase coherence button after I edited tracks, I could hear the low end disappear as if it were toggling the phase button on one of the mics. All right, so let me go ahead and just open up like a guitar part, and this is about free warping and dealing with phase issues in the phase coherent mode. So let me just open up a project. So I would sonically listen to it to see, a lot of times you may do phase coherency on drums as opposed to like a multi-mic guitar. There could be times when you'd want to do it on a multi-mic guitar. So let's say I just want to take all right, so let's say I just want to do some warping on this. So I will just go ahead and let's drop in. I'm going to select the warp markers here. So let's say I have both of these selected. So I don't have this in phase coherent mode. So let's say I just want to come over here and adjust some of these. So now we listen to it. Okay, so let's undo those changes. And when I'm going to go ahead and place these into a folder and enable the phase coherency here. So let's say we will do a similar edit to our guitar. Similar types of edits. So, it doesn't sound, so whether we have the phase, so let's say I want to take this note here and this note and move them up. So it doesn't sound like it's introducing any phase. Now, it could be that, if you look at the particular audio files themselves, if you're doing a multi-mic guitar, that the two guitar parts are out of phase, and maybe you don't want it to be phase coherent as you do the warping. So, it could be one of those things where you would experiment with the phase coherency and see what sounds best. But generally, like for the most part, people would use the phase coherent mode for kind of drum editing. So where you have like the snare that's going into the hi-hat mic, the kick mic, and overheads and room mics in addition to the two snare mics, let's say. But that seems to kind of work as expected on my end. All right, let me jump back to our live questions. Thanks for all the great questions so far. And if you've learned a new tip or trick, make sure you do hit the like button. So we see Benny just apologizing for his English. Your English is much better than my Swedish, so no apologies needed. All right, so we have a question from Frankie. Is there any difference between using frequency EQ in the channel strip versus insertion mode in terms of CPU cost? So if you're using the same, channel strip EQ here, which is the same one that we see in this channel strip, it's the same algorithm that's used in the Studio EQ. So it's not the frequency plugin, but it's the Studio EQ. The frequency could be a little bit more CPU because it is a dynamic EQ and it does linear precision. Where it's so it is a so when we go here, there's more bands to work with, and it's going to be linear phase EQ as well. So but the channel EQ between the Studio EQ and the channel EQ that we see here will have the same CPU utilization. So. All right, reading through comments. Thanks for all the great questions. All right, so we have the artist known as Love checking in. Thanks for joining us. And he's hit the like button. Thank you for that. All right, so we have a question. Is there any way to jump straight to the fader of the FX channels without scrolling through the whole mix console? I want to put an EQ after the reverb, and I just want to go to the effects send channel with no scroll. All right, so there's a couple ways of doing this. So let's say if let's see if I have an effects channel here on this, so I'll add just an effects channel on this particular track. All right, so once we're in our track, if it's going to the send, we could just say, okay, go to 2 targets. So if you're on the channel settings, you could just say, okay, let's go to our RoomWorks channel, and then you could immediately jump to, so you could also just kind of expand this. So you can say, okay, now I'm on the RoomWorks effects return channel, and then I could see what sources are feeding. So if I wanted to, again, just kind of jump to the next channel stage, you could also just come right over here and just say, okay, I'm going to hit Control or Command plus F. So you could just come right here and say, okay, I want to go to Room Works. And that will automatically take you to the channel just by clicking on the search icon here. And then, so if you have, let's say 100 audio tracks in between, so you just come here, say, okay, I want to go to Room, and hit Enter, and then that will take you straight to that particular track. So there's a couple of quick ways to navigate quickly to a channel without having to scroll kind of forever and ever. Okay, so we have Robert Higgins asked, what days and times are your live streams? Pacific time, please. Love your channel. So we do it at starting at 10 a.m. Pacific time. So 10 a.m. California, Oregon, Washington, probably parts of British Columbia as well. So 10 a.m. on Tuesdays and Fridays. All right. So we have Art saying hi. Thanks for joining us. And wishing everyone a happy new year. So we have a question from Art. I can't find Rewire function in Cubase 12. I wanted to use Reason as Rewire, but it's missing. How can I enable this function? So Reason has stopped support of Rewire, so it's no longer supported. And the main reason for that is now you get to run the latest versions of Reason just as a VST instrument. So you can come over here and just open up your Reason Studios or whatever it's called now, and just run it as a VST instrument. So you don't need to have two separate programs with separate documents. You could just open up Reason as a VST instrument inside of Cubase. So, but Reason Studios or Propeller Heads, they've stopped supporting it, and it's not working on contemporary operating systems. So it's kind of abandonware by them.¬ All right, so we have a question from Vanessa Barmfather. Not sure if you've answered, but is the Chords editor available in Cubase 11? Mine says it's off, and not sure how to activate it. So yeah, it's available in Cubase 11. So if we go to add a chord track, I think I may have one already in here. So as soon as we want to go to a chord edit, so I just kind of grabbed like with the pencil tool and kind of entered in a blank chord value and then double click, and then we could go to the chord editor and we could just choose our different chords here or go to the chord assistant. But often and if you have a chord event, you could just double click on it and that should launch your chord editor. And it works the same way in Cubase 12 as it does Cubase 11. All right, wonderful to see Randy Lee on the live stream. Gareth wants people to smash the like button. All right, I see that I am La Leche from Gareth. All right. I still think from my high school Spanish that he's calling me milk. So, all right, let's see if we have... All right, so I think I'm at the end of the live stream. We'll see if there's more questions that kind of creep in. I want to thank everyone for all the great questions. I hope that everyone has learned new tips and tricks, and we look forward to seeing everyone back on Tuesday, starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. So it's 10 a.m. California time. I think 6 p.m. in the UK and 7 p.m. in Central Europe. We'll see if more questions come up. If not, we'll wrap up a couple minutes early. All right, we'll see if there's more questions come up. We'll give it our minute or so. There's usually about a 30-second delay from when I talk to when it goes out to you guys. All right, so it looks like we are out of time. I just wanted to thank everyone again for the wonderful questions. Hope that everyone's learned some new stuff, and we look forward to learning new things on Tuesday. We want everyone to stay safe and healthy, and if you have questions that you want sent in advance, please send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de. With that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Everyone please stay safe and healthy, and we'll see everyone back on Tuesday. Have a wonderful weekend, and goodbye.